Hello everyone, this is Mr. Ferreira. Good to talk you through another set of slides. Today we'll be doing the second part of the effects of addiction. I just want to say before I start, well done to all of those of you who've done the creative tasks and shown me. They've been absolutely brilliant. You need to hand whatever you have in and I'll have a look at it. It's really important for us to see that you're doing work and you're kind of keeping things up to date. Before I start, a couple of things I'd like to say. I'm using a different version of the notebook software. I'm really struggling with getting it activated, so please forgive the smart notification aspect of this over here. Okay. Also, it's important for you to just keep communicating with us. Talk to us if there's any concerns. We can help you as best as we can. We can inform the school. We can talk to whoever we need to. In terms of the work, I'm really proud of so many of you really engaging in this. I know it's not an easy time. Just keep going, and hopefully in the near future we'll have some kind of change in how we're doing things. It's not clear what's going to happen. I've had a couple of meetings recently, and what we will try and do is just try and use Google Classroom slightly differently. We'll also maybe try something like the Hangout feature in which we can actually communicate with each other. Clearly, if you can hear anything, it's possibly my children in the background, but I hope that won't bother us too much. So let's get on with the lesson. So we're looking at tolerance. Now the key here in terms of tolerance, it just simply says if you use for a long time. Okay, so in other words, this is repeated use. Now, of course, in terms of addiction, there's a really good chance that people will do some of the addictive behaviors recreationally, but that's not really what we're talking about. We're using for a long time. What happens when we use for a long time is this system here. It says that we no longer, and this is key here, feel the same way. Okay, so in other words, there's lots of things that we can say we build up tolerance for. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. You might be able to tolerate your little brother. Okay, that's the same type of thing, repeated annoyance, and you build up tolerance. But in terms of drug use, of course, it will be repeated use of the drug. In terms of addictive behavior, it's repeated addictive behavior. Now the key to this is that we start taking larger doses in order to feel the same way. Now that's the key to tolerance, really. So you no longer feel the same way or respond in the same way, and therefore you have to take larger doses to feel the same effects before. Now of course you might be asking, well, why does this happen? Now I'm just going to simplify this down to three simple ways. Now the first one is enzymes. Okay, now I'm not a biology teacher. Arguably I'm a lot more handsome and intelligent and engaging than any biology teacher you've ever met, but that is also speculation. But enzymes are, in a very simple way, what break things down within your body. So it says here, your enzymes that break things down, that's the word metabolism, no longer have the same efficiency. Okay. Now this is probably quite realistic, because if you always broke things down in exactly the same speed, then we wouldn't be able to go from day to day with changes in our diet, changes over time, and so what it just is your body adjusting to the increase of the particular substance in your body. So of course, if it's not breaking down as quickly, then it means that we have reduced concentrations in the blood. Okay, so therefore it's weaker. The second thing is, of course, there's something to do with receptors. Now, this is where maybe I need you to consider, if you looked at some of the websites that I recommended for the biological model, and certainly what you see is that they'll have diagrams, especially that funky mouse one, where you see kind of what happens kind of when drugs take effect on the body. There's receptors in our brain that kind of either receive or block certain neurotransmitters. So one way that the body can adjust to the increased use of a particular drug, which is producing kind of dopamine, producing kind of different types of neurotransmitters, is to just simply to reduce the density. It's kind of like if I had a table full of glass jars and I wanted to throw a ping pong ball and for it to land into the glass jar. The more glass jars we have, the more chance that I would get the ping pong ball in a glass jar. However, of course, if I wanted to restrict kind of how many times the ball landed in, I'll just remove some of the glass jars. Now, the third way that we can look at is there's also this idea of learned tolerance. Now, this is quite good because it's trying to make kind of the effects of addiction not just about the biology. We can learn tolerance. And I suppose one of the things that you could talk about would be when you do something like smoking. Okay, the first time you try and smoke a cigarette and actually inhale it into your lungs, the chances are it will be a very negative kind of coughing, kind of fit experience. However, most smokers learn how to moderate the kind of smoke into their lungs. In the same way, we learn our tolerance. Okay, a lot of people when they first tried beer, for example, said, "Oh, they didn't particularly like it." Now they like it because they associate the beer drinking maybe with their friends, or the particular kind of social activity that they have. So this is obviously something which you need to consider. It's, as I said, you become more tolerant towards your little brother. That's a learned tolerance. So it's not meant to be overly complicated. Now, I felt like I should give you an illustration, and this is a great study, I mean, for several reasons. It's the fact that we're actually giving alcohol to prisoners. But of course, prisoners were used in this particular case because they are less valuable than citizens. We can discuss the ethics of this, but I'd rather kind of just move on to it. And what is really important here is that they are literally giving alcohol for 13 weeks, okay, to these prisoners so that they would be in a constant state of intoxication. Okay, so they probably worked out kind of how much alcohol they need to do to give, and they give them to the prisoners. Okay, so it says here, however, despite the fact that the first couple of weeks all the prisoners kind of changed kind of alcohol blood levels and behavioral signs of intoxication. Okay, so according to their blood and according to their behavior, okay, blood and behavior, they were intoxicated. However, it says these dropped in the following weeks as the men no longer appeared to be drunk. Okay, now unfortunately I have had experience with alcoholics, and what you might kind of notice about an alcoholic is that obviously if they go about, they're tripping over things, they're slurring their words, they're kind of acting drunk, people will kind of do something about it. So they're able to kind of hide it. From the original Discovery video, we saw once again that all of the addicts in that particular video pretty much functioned normally. Now this is only due because of the tolerance that their body has towards the drug. When they looked into these prisoners, they saw there were several things. They said increased tolerance for alcohol, okay. They mentioned metabolism, okay, and that was the start of people kind of recognizing that tolerance is part of a biological system, where they said that their blood alcohol levels were reduced. So it is actually quite true that somebody who drinks alcohol quite regularly probably can drink more alcohol than somebody who doesn't drink it as often because of metabolic tolerance. They also then noted that there was an element of learned tolerance. Okay, they'd basically learned how to get by with the daily demands of living. Okay, I'm not then suggesting that an alcoholic can drive a car or can hold down a job kind of very well, but there is a chance that this could happen. Now, moving on to the final component. Now, please, just a reminder that all three components, they pretty much can't be separated. However, the exam board will expect you to kind of do them separately. And the final one that we're going to look at is this thing called withdrawal syndrome. Now, they mentioned the word syndrome in the spec, okay? But of course, what we could have is psychological and physical symptoms, okay? The reason they call it a syndrome is that there's a combination of these two symptoms in order to make it a syndrome, okay? So if it's a singular, it's a symptom. If it's more than one, it's typically referred to as a syndrome. So, for example, after repeated cannabis use, I might have higher levels of maybe, I don't know, insomnia or poor concentration, coupled with this idea of maybe vomiting and diarrhea when I don't kind of smoke cannabis. Okay, so it's things like that. So putting a combination of these types of things in. Okay, so this is just kind of explaining this idea that syndrome is a collection of symptoms. Okay, but of course, withdrawal only happens when you discontinue or abstain. Okay, think about it in terms of your tolerance, think about it in terms of your dependence. My body is now tolerant of alcohol in my system, and as such, I'm quite dependent on it. And as soon as I stop, my body goes, hang on, buddy, what's going on here? And it tells me by going back to these particular symptoms and telling me, oh, okay, so I'm going to make you restless, and you're going to have muscle tension because you're not taking the particular substance like you used to. Okay, so now this is just kind of, I wouldn't call it self-explanatory, but just kind of getting into this. So it says, as the drugs wear off, okay, what we find is that these symptoms, okay, start happening. Now, of course, every drug, every addictive behavior will have different forms of symptoms. So anxiety, insomnia, irritability, all of these types of things could be linked to, same types of drugs. Other drugs might have different things. I have watched enough films to see that if you are on heroin, often your bowel movements kind of slow down, don't really particularly happen as regularly. And so, of course, when you kind of stop taking heroin, your bowel's going to kind of maybe start working. So these withdrawal symptoms, as I've just said, are different depending on the drug in question. But what is important here is that it's a negative impact. Okay? Your body, your brain, your life is pretty much, being kind of, if we look at that word salience we used for addictive kind of definitions, everything that you kind of do is involved in this particular drug. So when you don't take the drug, your body is going to have to tell you, it's going to be negative. Okay, and of course what happens is the best way to get rid of this negative is to take the drug again. So it becomes a kind of never-ending kind of circle that I might not like the fact that I smoke cigarettes and I want to give up. But as soon as I stop smoking, my body goes, well, hang on, I'm used to the effects of dopamine that nicotine produces and kind of, how it relieves my stress, psychological and things like that. So come on, I need to have a cigarette again. Of course, the easiest way to kind of deal with that is just simply take the drug again. Now, what is important here is it says here, the appearance of withdrawal symptoms it is an indication of dependence. Okay, the reason you have it is because you're dependent. So it kind of makes sense that we then say that withdrawal symptoms occur because you're trying to deal with the absence of the drug. Okay. Now, it also says that tolerance is a consequence of the body adjusting. Withdrawal is the same. your body adjusting. Now, the key to all of these things also is just a reminder that you can be tolerant, you can be dependent, you can have withdrawal symptoms and still not be an addict. Okay, think about it. If you drink coffee regularly and you stop drinking coffee, you're probably going to get a headache. Okay, that doesn't mean you're addicted to caffeine. So what we're looking at here is this idea is not necessarily defining what an addict is, it's defining components of addiction. I suppose you could say it like this. Every addict will have elements of dependence, tolerance and withdrawal. Okay? But not everyone who has dependence, tolerance and withdrawal is an addict. Now, these are just two phases that they have. And I'm not sure kind of why they really go through this, but I suppose it gives us more to write if we needed to write a bit more. So there's just acute withdrawal, acute meaning kind of quite small and short, basically within the first few hours of stopping a particular substance. Of course, we have cravings related to dependence, like we saw in the previous video, and your body is trying to adjust. Okay. However, over time, we also have post-acute. In other words, this is just for longer. So, I mean, smokers are actually quite familiar with this. There are some smokers who haven't smoked for 10, 15, 20 years, and they still kind of have this kind of overwhelming sense of, oh, wouldn't it be great to just have a cigarette? Okay, so they have this kind of cravings or feelings even years later. And if we get a chance to watch the Russell Brand documentary on Amy Winehouse, you can see when he comes into the presence of somebody who's got a bit of heroin, he kind of just, you can see him buzzing and stuff like that. There's this old kind of like old school kind of reminder of things. Okay, so what we find here is that it's, they say, characterized by emotional and psychological turmoil. Okay. This also kind of indicates kind of why addictive behavior is so difficult to get rid of, because this turmoil, obviously, you know, having a bad day, the easiest thing to do is just turn back to the particular thing that makes us feel better. Okay, and of course it takes over time, and eventually we do kind of balance ourselves and reorganize ourselves and get back to normality. Now, that is pretty much a short kind of introduction to the actual examinable topics of addiction. I'm really pleased that, you know, only questions like this, these are very short questions. We see what is meant by tolerance, what is meant by psychological dependence, kind of keyword there, psychological, 6 marks. In the exams that I've marked, and I'm an examiner for this particular paper, you know, they're not going to give you a long essay on this. There's no evaluation points. It's a kind of basic understanding of addiction. So I'll put this question on to Google Classroom and we can set it as a task to do. It's probably best for you just to use it also just to, do I understand what tolerance is? Do I understand what dependence and withdrawal is? Okay, that's all I'm doing today. I hope you are still keeping safe. Just keep ticking on, keep kind of doing a little bit kind of each day or every other day, just to make sure that you kind of don't forget about it. It would be really good when we do get to a point where we can talk to each other and maybe kind of speak through some of the concerns that we have. I feel at this stage I'm covering content that is pretty much accessible. You should be able to do this, and everything seems to be going well. Okay, you take care. Okay, bye.